100 years after the events of Aragami, a new assassin of the shadows emerges and must save his homeland from the Empire of Fire.
Here comes trouble!
Good hunting, successor.
Aragami II is a third-person stealth game at its core where you time your movements, leap from unsuspecting places, and work within the shadows to eliminate your enemies. It's a spiritual successor to the original that I'll be referencing a lot in this review, guys, not only because I thoroughly enjoyed the first game, but also and mainly because Aragami II makes a lot of changes that I feel took it in the wrong direction and weakened its most notable strengths. I'm starting off with its gameplay, and if you're new to the franchise, you play an assassin who's equipped with a plethora of tools and passive and active abilities that allow you to be extremely athletic and stealthy as you ninja your way through its levels. And these tools and abilities were definitely my favorite part of the gameplay. You get darts that put enemies to sleep or poison them, or put them in a berserk state where they'll attack other enemies. There's smoke bombs that'll stun nearby enemies and allow you to escape if you get noticed. You can also summon a shadow that'll help you kill two enemies at the same time who are near each other, or summon a shadow beast that'll kill an enemy at distance for you and make their body disappear. You can even pull unaware enemies toward your location to get a kill and leave their body hidden in the shadows, or go invisible for a short time. And those are just some of the abilities you can unlock and upgrade in the game that made it fun and made me feel like I was a murderous threat lurking in the shadows. Outside of that though, the game really suffers from a repetitive gameplay loop where you're constantly returning to the same levels, and it also robs itself of the super rewarding stealth system that made the first game so damn good. So if you're a returning player from the original, there's a lot here that gets lost in the new features and gameplay design that was a huge disappointment for me. The first Aragami is a stealth game for purists of the genre. There's no combat system, getting seen by an enemy will likely lead to you dying, and the enemies literally use light sources to draw you out of the darkness and do damage to you. And I say do damage, but in most cases, one hit by an enemy would kill you depending on what difficulty you played on, which made your timing and decision making and risk taking extremely rewarding. Using your character abilities was also intrinsically tied to playing in the shadows, since it's the only place you could recharge your mana pool. And in general, it was just a slower paced, methodical experience that had a focus to its stealth design that synergized and really tested your skill in game. All that is gone in Aragami II. What once was a challenging and immersive experience has turned into an easy and unfulfilling one. Firstly, there's no difficulty settings, and your character is so mobile and fast now that it's super easy to escape from enemies if you get seen or surrounded. Even without using tools or abilities, you can simply dash around, climb something, and double jump away until the enemy aggro cools down. There's also a new combat system, and a shitty one at that, where if you can't get away, you can simply fight and kill an enemy head to head. And I say it's shitty too because it's really basic, and your dash and parry abilities make it way too easy to survive almost any fight without it feeling like you really earned it. You also no longer need the shadows, specifically to rejuvenate your mana, since the whole dark versus light system is just simply gone. Now, don't get me wrong, you still need to be stealthy to some degree. Sneaking around, hiding in tall grass, creeping on rooftops, and hanging from ledges is still there, but with such a lack of reliance on playing in the shadows, getting punished for bad decisions or bad timing, or really being forced to play smart and outplay the AI. It just felt shallow and never took me to that heavenly place I want to be in a stealth game where I'm sunk in deep, surrounded, moving from cover to cover, learning all I can about what's around me, prioritizing the highest threats, and patiently and cautiously positioning myself for kills without alerting anyone, and ultimately getting in and out of levels and completing objectives with all enemies dead and no one knowing I was ever there. I love that shit, guys, and where the original game succeeded here, Aragami II unfortunately fails. The best mission in the game was when it forced me to get through an entire level without being seen or killing anyone. Not only that, but they tied it to a cool story element where it was about rebalancing my character who had been killing a lot and getting reconnected to his true purpose. Now, unfortunately, there's no morale system or in-game mechanics or consequences that might influence you to play one way or another. You just get this level no matter what. So even if you've been playing the game passive and only incapacitating enemies, you're gonna get this level, which is a bit unfortunate and takes away from the overall experience, but the game needed way more of this type of focus and challenge, because by having a more combat-centric experience where you can constantly zip around levels and get kills with no real threat or consequences, it really got out the heart of what made the original game and stealth gameplay in general so great. I'm giving gameplay 2 out of 5 stars. Graphics are next, and visually, they took the game in a slightly different direction, which actually made it look worse. The original Aragami had a very artistic and dark look by default that not only looked cool, but emphasized you using the shadows to sneak around and get through its levels. Here, they went for a much brighter and higher texture approach, with textures that still aren't great and ended up giving it a really dated look. I did really like some of the character models. Getting to customize yourself was pretty cool, but with the removal of the shadow essence system, the dark and light system I referenced, it really took away a visually immersive element that made the first game really good looking. You wore a cape in the original, and your mana pool or shadow essence pool was visually lit up on the cape in a cool pattern, so you could see how much mana you had left to use your abilities and when you needed to return to the shadows to recharge it. With that gone, a lack of effects in general, and the transition away from a more artistic and darker look, Aragami II is far less appealing graphically. I'm giving it 2 out of 5 stars. Audio's up next, and the game has a really nice soundtrack, but it just doesn't mix well with the gameplay, guys. Its songs are beautiful with a lovely Japanese-influenced sound, very much like the first game, but the original's music also carried this mysterious and eerie tone in its tracks that introduced an intensity and anxiety into its stealthy gameplay that totally boosted it and made it more fun. Aragami 2's soundtrack is good, but it honestly sounds like it was composed for a Disney cartoon or a Pixar film instead of a dark, stealthy assassin game. Sound effects were a letdown as well, and the actual soundscape of the world is where I felt it was really missing more. Audibly, it just lacked in-game environment sounds that made it feel alive and immersive. The voice acting was also a total bust. All the characters speak in this bullshit, unintelligible gibberish made to sound slightly Japanese. I think. It's horrible, guys. The first game did this shit too, and I hate it when games do this. It always comes off feeling cheesy and underdeveloped or even lazy. So, a lot of disappointment audio-wise, guys. I'm giving it 2 out of 5 stars. All right, let's talk about the story, and this is another major aspect where the game completely fails to live up to its predecessor. You play an assassin, born within a lineage of shadow assassins, who's been affected by a magical affliction that turns you into an Aragami as you fight to protect your people and homeland. And my first major disappointment here is that they completely abandoned the lore established in the first game, which not only was super creative and original, but it was weaved into the fabric of its stealth gameplay in a way that gave your character and the world you play in a ton of life that Aragami II was definitely missing. And on its own, it lacks any kind of identity as well. You never get to know your character, and all the other characters are so damn superficial that I never cared for a single one of them. And same goes for the enemies. Your people are literally getting invaded and taken hostage and tortured, but the writing was so poor and there was such a lack of substance to it all that it never felt meaningful. Horribly sad and brutal things would happen at certain points, and I knew what I should have felt in those moments, but it never succeeded to draw me in where I was invested enough to care. I remember playing the first game and having a conversation with my buddy I was playing with about how damn cool the story was and how surprised we were by it. It was well thought out and well written. Its concepts and characters and twists were excellent. And sadly, Aragami II completely contrasts that, not only by trying to reinvent itself, but also by just delivering a far weaker plot. I'm giving story 1 out of 5 stars. Settings are up, and let's start with the key rebinds, which were great. WASD, ESDF, and mouse and numpad could all get rebound without issue, so all was good here. Moving on to video and graphics, which are a bit of a mixed bag. Video settings offer everything you need, and there are widescreen aspect ratios available, which is great. Graphics, however, are missing quite a few things. There's no texture options or anisotropic filtering or level of detail options. So some big misses here that I would have liked to see. Audio's up next, and same thing here. You only get a music and sound effects slider. There's no master or voice slider, which is really unfortunate. I would have loved to turn off the horrible voices in the game, for instance, so I definitely dinged them here. And lastly are the gameplay options, which offer some good camera and movement mechanic settings, and there's even an option to toggle off all blood effects below, if you're into that sort of thing. And the only missing options here are colorblind modes, which unfortunately they don't include. So they got some stuff right and missed the mark on others. I'm giving settings 3 out of 5 stars. Let's give it a final score, guys, and unfortunately, Aragami II was a big letdown for me, and I spent a lot of time comparing it to the original, which I honestly don't consider a masterpiece of a game either. It is an excellent stealth game that I loved, but it clearly was made by a small team that did their best with the resources they had. It did have an incredible amount of potential and room to grow, however, and that's where I feel Aragami II failed. It does add a ton of new features, but they're not things the gameplay benefits from, and it abandons many elements from the original that made it a unique and kick-ass stealth experience. I'm giving Aragami II 2 out of 5 stars, and I hate to give it such a poor score, yo. The developer behind these games is a tiny developer from Spain who I really want to support and who really tapped into something great with the original Aragami, so I hope they find a way to return to that. Guys, thanks so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed the review. If you did, give me a like below, and if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe and bell button to join me for all my future reviews. Check out my Patreon to support. I definitely need your support to keep this going and growing, guys. Thank you again, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. GG.